All right, folks, welcome to the second edition of Tiny Talks. Super happy that we're continuing this like weekly ritual. I hope this goes off for a long time. So yeah, um, on the Sunday afternoon, happy to see a lot of faces today. So yeah, without much of further ado, let's get into it. So the format will be we'll have a talk and then followed by Q&A. So over to you, Himanshu. Maybe you can start with a quick introduction and then go into
Yeah.
the topic.
So, hello guys. I'm Himanshu Chhatpar. So, I've recently joined at a startup called GroundUp as a front-end engineer. So, I was selected for a React role, and now like it has transitioned into React Native too. So, I do React as well as React Native now. And like one of the first full features I got to implement was the deep linking part, which I will talk about today. So first, let me share my screen. Yeah.
Himanshu, quick
So
question: is your video on?
I think it is okay. Yeah, it's on.
Uh, can others see him?
No, actually, it is just black screen.
Yeah, I can't see, it's just black.
Any? How do I fix it?
Do you have like a cover on the webcam by any chance?
No. No. Okay, my screen is still visible.
Yes, screen is visible.
So there's something look off.
Do you want to just try the drop down in the video settings? Are there other options do you see at the top? In video itself, scroll right side may scroll to the top. Um, just okay, there's only one option. All right, I think cool. I think we can see the screen, so we can move forward with that.
Yeah, sorry for this. I've not really used Zoom. So. Okay, so like the whole part is I'll show some like what we do today is first I'll explain what actually push notification and deep linking is. Then how do push notification work in Expo, because we are working with React Native. Expo is like a library or framework that gives you some sort of a starting point to build upon. And how do you actually deep link? So this is like the three-part structure I'll follow today. So first of all, let me explain what deep linking really means. So deep linking means when you get when you want the user to transition to a particular part of a website, that is called a website or an app, like it doesn't matter, but you want the user to reach a particular screen, that is deep linking. So in our app, there is a particular screen. I'm calling it a dynamic screen for now. So what I want is whenever a notification is received by the user and user clicks on it, so you get redirected to this particular screen, which I'll be referring to dynamics, which I'll be referring to as dynamic screen. Right. So this is our target. Like this is what we want to do. And since we want this to happen, like there are many apps that use this. Something like Reddit, when you get a post notification and when you click on the notification, you get redirected to the post, not the home screen where you get a feed of all of the posts, right? So this is what we are trying to implement here. So let me first tell how push notification actually work in Expo. So this is sort of a really good uh, explanation on the Expo documentation itself, like how it works. So usually there are two ways to implement push notifications. So either you can do it through the Expo, or you can use your custom backend to do it. So through Expo, what you do is, okay, before actually doing push notification, what you need is uh, user. So whenever a user installs an app, a token is associated to that user. Now this token is something like expo and in square brackets some random number or random string, I would say. Right. So this is a unique token that is corresponding to that particular application. So when we send a notification, we know it belongs to which application. So on every fresh install, you get a token. So let's suppose I download something like Chrome. So now Chrome gets a token. If I delete it and download it again, I'll get a new token. So this is how these tokens work. And who gives this token? Like this is given by I think Expo, but we don't really care. What we care about is that token. So when we send a post request to Expo, you the Expo backend talks with the Firebase. So since I'll be focusing on Android, but the iOS part is similar. So on the Android part, what you do is you use Firebase Cloud Messaging. This is FCM, and through that you get a notification. So you basically send a push notification to the Expo backend, and the next part of sending it actually to the phone is done by Expo itself. So what we need to do is just send a notification to Expo, like send a post request to Expo. In that you need to send you need to send the Expo token so that Expo knows where do we actually want to send the notification. So then it reaches over here. So this is like a good example. So this is like the Expo post token, right? So this is what we need. So your backend sends a post request to this. You can send custom messages and custom data. So data is something that is important. We'll talk about it a bit later. But for now, you just send a token to the Expo backend. Expo backend sees, like if it is an Android, it uses FCM to send a notification. If it's an iOS, it uses APNS. So this is how the whole structure works. So, like, does anyone have any questions over here? Fine. Okay. So now this is like theoretically how we actually send notifications. Now the data part, which I skipped upon, is the most important part. So with data, what you do is each notification is sent as an object. So in that object, you have a data key associated with it. In the data key, you can put custom data. So if I want to say give a photo ID as 152, I can do that. If I want to add something else like photo ID 152, comma user ID 10, I can do that. So this data is basically an object. So you can put all kind of data that you want so that the notification actually has some data associated with it. So now why do we need this data? In our case, what we want to do is transition user to a particular screen, right? So when we send a notification, we can send custom data in this data key, and through that we can destructure that data on the app itself, and then we can transition to the particular screen. So this is how it's like supposed to work, right? So this is the whole flow of it. So now I'll explain actually the whole problem statement so that you get a clear understanding of what we are actually doing. So on clicking notification, user must be redirected to a particular screen on the mobile. Right. The main condition is the screen is reachable only if the user is authenticated. Right. So since we are using JWT tokens to handle authentication, there can be cases where JWT has expired and user has gotten notifications. So we need to be aware of those cases too. Since that screen is a protected screen, you can't redirect any user to that particular screen. And deep linking, this is like a hard requirement that it should work when the app is in foreground, background, or killed. Like it shouldn't happen that the notification works only when the app is killed or when the app is in foreground or app is in background. It should work in all cases. Okay. So so far, does anyone have any questions? Okay, so now the next part is I'll discuss all the possible solutions which we have thought through, and like I wanted to show the code for it, but it gets really icky, and like icky in the sense I need to show recordings and all of that. So it's rather better we just discuss the solutions, and if anyone wants to implement it on their own time and is stuck, they can always reach out to me. So this is what we're gonna do. We'll just discuss all the possible solutions to it. Right. Okay. So the okay, before starting through the solutions, I just wanted to show uh, like this is the push part, right? So I'll just show the structure of our application for now, like how our application really works. So this is the app app.js. So has all the providers and Redux and everything set up over here. So you can see the Redux provider Apollo. Since we're using GraphQL, it has Apollo language provider and all of that. So this is what our app is. Then there is a root screen. So this is the root screen. The root screen is just a container and an app navigator. So container basically has some styling properties along with the status bar. So since it is an app, there is a status bar associated to it. So it's just that in the container. And then there's this navigator. So navigator is one of the most important parts of the whole logic part. So here what we do is we check if the user is authenticated or not. If the user is authenticated, we can navigate them to home screen. So with JWT token, right? And else we navigate them to the login screen. So since we don't want the user to be logged out after each app kill, we store the data in secure store. Basically, it's similar to local storage. If you're not sure about what expose secure storage, it's similar to local storage. You can store custom data over there in the form of key value pairs. So we store a JWT token and every relevant details over there in the secure store, and then uh, if the token is still valid, it is not expired, we can navigate them to the home screen. So essentially, the user is authenticated. If the token is expired or we don't have any token, we navigate them to login screen. Through the login screen, they can send username, password, or whatever. The login flow is there. After completing that, we can navigate them to the home screen. Okay. So the home screen is pretty simple. It has just the home screen details. And from here, we can navigate to the dynamic screen. So this is like the screen we want. This is our target screen. We want to reach over here. So on the custom flow, I'll just summarize once again. You go through app.js. So here all the providers, etc. is set up. Once everything is set up, you go to the root screen. Root screen is just a container with the status bar and the navigator. The app navigator is the main logical part where you check if the user is authenticated or not. If the user is authenticated, we can navigate them to your home screen. If else, we navigate them to login screen. And once the user reaches the home screen, we can navigate them to the dynamic screen. Like okay, and this screen, like the user can transition to this screen on clicking some button. So it isn't like direct transition. The user can interact with the home screen. When they click some button, they can transition to the dynamic screen. So this is like the app. Are there any questions over here? Okay, so I'll just clear the tech stack what we're using. We're using React navigation for navigation, and for managing everything using Expo and React Native. So yeah, and navigation and React navigation, if you have not used it, it's it's quite different to normal navigation that we do in web. Here you use something like Stack Navigator or Tab Navigator. So it's quite different. You can't like you need to push things on top of the stack, like something like it is similar to the Stack Navigator is very similar to how the browser navigation works, but it has certain differences. That's all. Okay, so if this everything is clear, we can now jump into the solutions. So should we start with solutions? Does anyone have any questions? Okay. So the first solution is, what we can do is we set up the notification. Okay. So I've shown how notification works. One main thing you need to remember is whenever a notification is closed, the default behavior is you transition to the home page. So that is the default behavior. We don't need to do any configuration to reach the home page, right? The only configuration we need to do is to link from home page to the corresponding page. Like in our case, this dynamic screen. So by default, whenever you click a notification, you reach the home screen. Okay. Yeah. So the first obvious solution is, well, the main concern here is authentication, right? So if the user is authenticated, we can easily navigate them from home screen to the dynamic screen, right? So the obvious solution is just let us just wait until the user reaches the home screen, and then we transition them to the required screen, right? Okay, so this is like the most obvious solution. Here, there are like 2-3 problems associated with it. When I implemented this, the first thing that popped up was like the notification handler needs to be at top level, right? So this is a GitHub issue associated to it. So what they say is, you need this to be at the top component, right? Yeah. So you use this hook to actually get the notification, and this hook needs to be the first thing you need to do when the app is opening. So you can't set this handler up on the home screen. Then the next is, it cannot handle all app states in case of foreground, background, and all those cases. Why am I saying this? Because the user needs to be logged in, right? So where are we checking the logged in flow? We are checking it during the this part, right? App navigator part. So once you have gone through the navigator, like you can check, but it's like you need to keep checking and all of that. So it's quite different. So we are just checking once if the user is authenticated over here, App Navigator, right? So if we have gone through that screen, it means the user is like navigated to home screen or some other screen. Now, when the app is in foreground and you're on some other screen and the notification comes, like we are not going through this flow again, right? App Navigator ka flow again. So like you can't really transition then. So also if the user is logged out and it is on the login screen and then you get the notification, in that case this also doesn't work, right? So these are like some certain problems associated to it. So the main reason is like the handler needs to be at the top level. So in our case, the app.js, wherever we have set up the Redux language provider, etc., we need our notification handler to be here. So here we need a notification handler. Right. Okay. So this is like the first solution to it. So does anyone want to ask any questions to this solution? Okay. So the next solution is using secure storage. So I've already talked about what secure storage is. It is basically local storage, right? Local storage equivalent for Expo applications, React Native. So what we do is, okay, before going into this solution, we need to know that this is asynchronous code, right? So the notification handler is asynchronous code, as well as setting up the navigating, and all of that is asynchronous. So also accessing to secure storage is also asynchronous. So a lot of stuff is asynchronous over here. So we need to use promises to link them, and uh, like it is not really trivial. So the only thing that stays constant between two asynchronous flows is a secure store, right? Suppose there are two asynchronous flows going on, right? The user is navigating, that flow is going on, as well as the notification has come and you have clicked on it. So that handling is going on. So both of them are asynchronous. So since both of them are asynchronous, you really can't tell which one finishes first or second. So the only thing that remains constant between two asynchronous flows is the secure storage, right? So what we do is move the handler to the top. So we are building upon this previous solution. So we are moving the handler to the top. So instead of setting up in the home screen, we are setting up the handler over here in the app itself, right? The main before loading everything, we need to make sure our notification is. So we have corrected this part. Like the handler is now at the top level. The next part is what we do is okay. If the move the handler to the top and store the data in secure storage, the notification is clear. So here we can set up a notification handler, and if there is a notification, we store the notification data, like notification data in secure store. Right. So we have talked about what this data is. This data is used for our navigation. So in data object, we can add additional information, and that information we can use to navigate to the dynamic screen. Also, this dynamic screen is named dynamic because it takes in data from routes and fetches corresponding data. So you destructure data from the routes object and then use the data to fetch all the required data. So if I give routes object a certain ID, it fetches, you destructure it, get the ID, and fetch all the data related to that ID. Right. So this is how dynamic screen works. So it needs, you can say, some sort of ID to fetch all the relevant data. This is not a static screen. It depends on what ID is passed to. Okay. So here, what we do is move the handler to the top, store the data in secure store if the notification is clicked. So since we have moved our handler to the top, wherever notification is clicked, we store this data in the secure store. After storing it, we go through the login flow, like the auth flow runs parallelly or later on, like that depends on like it is asynchronous, so we can't really say when it runs, but yeah. So, but I'm pretty sure it runs after this code because our handler was over here, right? So when the auth code runs and the user is authenticated, we can check if data is there in secure store. So what we're doing is we are storing this data in the secure store. Then during login over the app navigator part, here we check if authenticated navigator to home screen. So this is what we are doing now. This is what we are doing before. Here, what we are doing is adding an additional condition over here. If authenticated, like there are two cases now. So case one would be there is data in secure store. There is data in secure store. So in that case, we navigate to this dynamic screen. Okay, and case two, there is no data in secure store. So there is no data in secure store. Navigate to home screen. Right. So this is how we are working now. So since we are storing data in secure store, we need to check, hey, is there a data key in the secure store? If there is, it means the user has clicked a notification. Otherwise, it wasn't there, right? So user has clicked. We can check if it is there. If it is there, we navigate to dynamic screen. If there is no data, we navigate to home screen. If there is no data, it means that the user has not clicked notification. But there is one gotcha case here. Like once a notification is given to a user, the data is stored, right? So when you're transitioned to the dynamic screen, you need to make sure you delete that data so that the next notification doesn't like if a notification is handled once, we don't want the app to handle it again. Otherwise, what would happen is if you do not delete, if this is the flow we are running through, what would happen is you store data in secure store and navigate to the home screen. This is fine. Now the app is killed. Suppose the user goes on and kills the app and then opens the app again. So since there is already data in secure store, in the this time there is no notification, but still there is data in secure store. So the user is navigated to the dynamic screen. So we don't want that. So what we need to is navigate to dynamic screen and delete data in secure store. And delete data in secure store. So once the user has like transitioned to the required screen, we delete the data so that delete data in secure store so that there is no confusion on if the notification was handled or not. So this is like the main flow. So are there any questions regarding this flow?
Himanshu, I didn't get the reason to delete the data. Why can't a new notification override the existing data? Like,
Okay,
doesn't it
it,
work that way?
it would override, but there is a case in which there is no notification. You handle one notification, right? Now the user is transitioned to the dynamic screen. Now the user kills the app. Now there is data there in secure store. So whenever the user logs in again, we are going through
Okay.
this flow. So we check if the user is authenticated. Let's say the user is authenticated. Now there is data in secure store. There is data because we didn't delete that data, right? There is still data. So you would navigate again to the dynamic screen. Now in this case, there was no notification. You still navigated to dynamic screen, right?
Got it. Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay. So like there are also drawbacks to this case. The notification you can read through this part, like whatever I explained, this is just that part. Now the pros of this approach are notification in this case work if the app is killed. Like if the app is killed, the notification works. But like the main issue with this is to make sure it works on every app state, we need to regularly check the secure store. Let's suppose the user is already logged in, he's in doing something on the app, then he gets a notification and then he clicks on the notification. In that case, what would happen is the handler would run and you would store data in the secure store. You would store data, but there is no one to actually use that data, right? So we are using or consuming the data only when the auth flow is run. So the auth flow is run only once on the start. So since there is no auth flow run, we don't transition to that screen. So that data is there in the secure store. The user kills the app, user starts again, then he's transitioned to the required screen. So this is what would happen. So this doesn't work on every app state. Uh, on every app state in the terms of if the application is on in the foreground or background. In that case, it doesn't work. But it does work in the case the app is totally clean and you get a fresh notification. In that case, it works. So to make sure it works on every app state, like we need to regularly check the secure store. So you need to set up an interval. Like this is a solution you could use. You need to regularly check the secure store. Hey, is there some data? If there is a data, you transition to the required screen. So this is like how do you fix it to work in every scenario? So this is one solution, but we didn't really use this solution. So any questions on this whole solution, pros, cons, anything? Okay. So the next solution is the one that actually is there, is what we're using. So this is using timeouts. Okay. So here the main problem was what? Right. Let's take a step back. The main problem was there were two asynchronous flows. We don't know which flow is like we do know the authentication flow is run after the notification is handled, but the main problem was there are multiple asynchronous flows, right? So to fix that issue, we are using timeouts now. So here also it is very similar. You set up the handler on the top, like what we have done over here. So that part is same. You set up the okay. You set up the handler here. Set up the like set up the handler here. That is fine. Here we are not using secure store. So this part is not there now. We are not using secure store. What we are doing is uh, here we'll check and see if the navigator is set up and user is logged in. Then we navigate. Okay. So we can't really directly navigate because everything like the navigator and etc. is set up over here, right? So we directly can't navigate. We need to wait for it to finish. So that was also the reason why we are navigating through this screen, not directly from here, because we need to wait for navigator to set up. That's why we are using all the secure store solution, because once we use secure store, we are sure that this part is run. Then when the navigator is run, it can check if it has data and navigate to the particular screen. So here, what we need to do is, here what we need to do is we need to make sure the notification is received. When the notification is clicked, like that is the case we're talking about. When the notification is clicked, if the navigator is set up and user is logged in, we can navigate easily. So these are the only two cases, right? We need the user to be logged in and navigator to be set up. Else, what we do is we recursively wait until navigator is set up and user is logged in asynchronously. So this is like a very clean solution. So the solution is over here too. So you basically create a ref. So what the solution here is, you create a ref on the top level and you pass that ref down to the navigator and set the current to true when the navigator is set up. Okay. There is some disturbance, I think, from my side. Wait for a minute. Yeah. So here what we do is we set up a ref on the app itself. In our case, we would set up the ref over here. Like we set up the ref and we pass the ref to the root screen. You pass the ref over here. And this ref then goes to the root screen. Root screen passes it to the navigator, ref, whatever. And then the app navigator gets the ref. So it gets the ref over here. And then whenever we use effect to basically set the ref to true, whatever the ref was, the ref dot current ref, okay, ref dot current to true, right? So this is a sort of flag for me, so that I know the app navigator is set up or not. So we set that to true over here, and in the app screen, what we do is this is like the asynchronous part of it. So we now know when the navigator is set up. So this part is done. User logged in, we can check if the JWT is valid or not. So this part is not a huge deal. Like it also varies on how the user is logged in or not. So this part is pretty specific to the application, but you can really check if the user is logged in or not. So these two cases we can check on the app itself. So since we have a ref to ref which gives information if navigator setup is set up, and we can check if user logged in, right? So now we can check these two cases. Now what we need to do is we just need to recursively wait until this condition is met. So here the solution is the same thing. There is a delay of something, like this is a promise. We just delay for some minutes. Here we await for check navigation, right? So in the check navigation, what we do is, if the navigation is not set up, so this is what it means. If there is no navigation ref dot current, that means our navigation is not set up. We wait for 500 seconds and then we check for navigation again. This code would just be modified if not navigation dot current. Here it would be and user should be logged in. So in that case, we delay for 500 seconds, then check for navigation again. So this would move on recursively until whatever time. Now, once both of these conditions are met, we can basically navigate our user. So if navigate.current and the user is logged in, we can actually directly navigate. So that isn't really an issue. So this is the sort of solution. Here, the drawback would be that it leads to some delay because of timeouts. Because when the user clicks on notification, he won't directly get like instantaneously be redirected. You would have some lag because of await, delays, and all of that. But the pros is it works for all cases, no matter if the app is in foreground, background, or not, because whenever a user clicks on the notification, the handler is run. The handler we set up over here is run. So in the handler, we can basically recursively wait until all the conditions are satisfied. And one of the other reason also is, since we're using asynchronous flows, we're not blocking the main thread of the JavaScript runtime. So this solution works pretty well for our case, and this is what we're using in our code for now. So yeah, this is like the whole flow of how we implemented this. So yeah, any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, like, if there is some demo or something like the real world application using
Actually,
this.
for demo, I think Reddit ka notifications, you can see through it.
Huh.
But I have not built an app because like there are
Like
a lot
what
of moving
exactly
parts over
that?
here.
Okay, notification thing I understood. So like, what exactly that deep linking does? So you
So
told,
deep linking means
yeah.
whenever the user clicks on the notification, you want to transition that user to a particular screen.
Okay,
So
through
yeah,
notification.
through notification.
Okay.
So Reddit ka post is a very good example. When you get a notification of post, you click on it, you are redirected to that post ka page.
So is it only applicable on mobile, or it can be done in browsers? Like in
Deep
browsers, we
linking
get.
is there for browsers too, I think. But what we have done is it is for a mobile application.
Okay.
I think it can be done on the web too. There are, I guess, tutorials for it. And for the web, it would be easier, I think, easier than this mobile ka case.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so Himanshu, is there any cost associated with these deep link push notifications?
Cost
Like
associated.
yeah, like if you're saying we have to send to Expo backend and it
Yeah.
uses Firebase and sends to the Android. So do they charge? What's the scenario here?
Okay. I'm not really sure about the charges. Because that was done by the backend engineer. So, like how our notification works is, I basically you need a token to send a notification, right? So, how this works is I send the token to the backend, like GraphQL backend. So now we have the token on the backend. We have the user ID associated to it. So we can send notification whenever we want. And
Got it.
once the notification is received on the front end, I handle all the part of this deep linking part. So I'm not really sure about the charges that they are associated, but you can play around with it. So the expo, I think it gives you some, not sure.
No, we were doing some cost cutting related to push notifications.
Okay.
That's why I asked. So I don't
Yeah.
have any idea around this as well.
Yeah. Actually, there is an API for you to play around. Yeah. This expo push notification tool. So here you need to put your push notification over here, and then you can send the data and everything, and you can send a notification directly. So you
Got
can
it.
use this to test the notifications, but actual cost really I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I mean, like there must be like if you are doing
Yeah,
it from your backend and Expo is using Firebase and then
yeah.
sending you,
Expo
there
does
should
use
be some,
Firebase. Yeah,
then there should be some cost that comes to you, not just Expo doing it for free, right? That's what
I mean
I was thinking.
it could also be the number of notifications you're
Right,
sending.
right, right.
That could also be a limit. Like there are some
Yep,
500,000 free notifications. After that, they would charge them. Not really sure about the charging.
got it, got it. Thanks.
Folks, any other questions? Just drop the feedback form in the chat. Make sure you fill it out. Oh, finally we can see.
अभी से-
Hello.
Sorry. अच्छा, I didn't know ये ऐसा था.
Oh,
Was there a cover on the cam?
yeah,
हाँ, I
like a
think वो
flag.
inbuilt cover था जो already था. I just noticed it now. Sorry.
That it sort of felt like that only because it was like pitch black and your Zoom settings were
नहीं, actually ये नया company का laptop है. I've not really used it.
all right.
हमारा पूरा meeting is on Slack, तो कोई video on नहीं करता.
Okay. Okay. Cool. So yeah, folks. Feel free to not feel free, like do fill out the feedback form so that since we are in the very early stages of this series, so we know how to shape this up. One thing that I want to sort of work on is key, like lower the length of the talk so that it becomes sustainable for people to attend as well. Like I'm just thinking in terms of like TED Talks have a upper limit of like 18 minutes, where I am thinking we should go with like reach the holy grail of like 8 minutes, just 8 minutes, man. Share the problem statement, share solutions. You don't need to code it out, but yeah, um, share things in under 8 minutes, and then have Q&A, and then we're done. And then sort of that makes it sustainable. All right, cool, folks. People on the call, if you would like to volunteer to take up something for the next week, either just DM me or reply in Discord. And yeah, that's about it. Anything else you want to touch on, Himanshu or anyone else before we wrap this off? All right, cool. Thanks, Himanshu, for taking this. I think this was very, um, like, I think native is something I'm, um, I think not most people on Rocket have sort of explored, because mostly we have,
Same here. The company का task है, तो I started with native.
yeah. But yeah, I think that is pretty cool. Like mobile development has um, different challenges. So yeah.
Web is a lot easier, I feel.
Oh, really?
हाँ, मतलब front end React, it is like very simpler compared to React Native. Like
Okay.
most of the packages don't work in Expo managed framework too. So you need to eject and like, it becomes a mess real quick.
And then I think testing might also take more time, right? Compared to web. Web may you see the changes very quickly.
Huh. But it's not really that a bigger deal. Either the main bottleneck is sometimes the app works on debug mode, but when you create a UAT or a production mode, it crashes. Like then, like it is just you. ये हो सकता है क्या वो हो सकता है क्या you just start like theorizing maybe this is a case and you check if that is the case. So in that case, debugging is a bit tougher. But yeah.
That's interesting. Like curious to know how your thoughts evolve with time. Let's say like 6 months later, I want to do a check-in to see how it is going. All right.
चलेगा. For now, so I feel कि native is tougher. But yeah, it could change.
Yeah. 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 I think like I have dipped my hands in like mobile front end, back end. Like I feel like everything is like when it's new, you see that there's a lot of challenges, but once you get familiar with it, comfortable with it, you know the challenges that they're going to come. So more or less, it's more about getting caught off guarded rather than the challenges themselves. So once you know, ki, haan, these are the things that you need to do, I think yeah, gets easier with time. I hope so.
And one thing I wanted to point out, I really liked how Himanshu compared different solutions to the same problem. So that was very interesting to know that
Because
okay,
I
this
went through
this
the
has
whole flow
some,
myself.
yeah, it was like okay, this has some drawback, this had some good points. So that was interesting, Himanshu.
Yeah, and that's what's happened in real world applications, right? When we are building just apps for just showcasing, or just as a toy thing, we don't really care about pros and cons because we just want to show that hey, this thing works. But when you're actually deploying things to production, you have to make sure that any of the cons should not be a deal breaker. At the same
Right.
time, I think Kushank, you mentioned, right? You focused on what is the cost of this thing. So those things also come into play when you're evaluating anything to be deployed at a large scale. So yeah, I am I'm happy we're doing this production knowledge sharing. So sincerely hope it continues. Folks, if you want to continue this, let's volunteer for the next thing. And yeah, that's about it. Not going to take much time because I want you to keep showing up in the upcoming sessions. I'm going to stop this here. Have a good rest of the Sunday and see you next time.